This is In Fintech, the podcast for the global fintech community, brought to you by EC1 Partners.
Welcome to the EC1 In Fintech podcast. I'm joined today by Ulisse Dell'Orto, which I hope I pronounced correctly. Ulisse is the MD of APAC for Chainalysis, a fast-growing fintech firm. Thank you, Ulisse, for joining me today. Lovely to catch up with you. It'd be great to know a little bit more about Chainalysis, who you guys are, and what you're doing.
So thanks, first of all, for having me, Simon. It's great to talk to you today. I'm very happy to share a bit more about Chainalysis. So Chainalysis is the blockchain data company. In the past, we've been focusing on providing compliance and investigational services to governments, regulators, cryptocurrency businesses, and financial institutions. That being said, in the past few years, we've seen that there is much growing interest in services that are not simply connected to preventing money laundering on the blockchain, which is what we started doing back in 2014, but also trying to understand how to take advantage of data that is generated on blockchain. Is that for making the right investments? Is that for evaluating the growth of a company? Those are all things that we are doing at Chainalysis. As I mentioned, we started as the leading solution to provide anti-money laundering software to the three verticals that I mentioned before. That being said, our scope has expanded, and currently we really focus on basically leveraging the best blockchain data in the space, whether it's to prevent money laundering or to facilitate investments and evaluations in the space.
Interesting. I mean, I think within the world of fintech, like AML is not necessarily kind of a new topic. Neither is maybe blockchain or crypto these days. So the fact that it's all coming together as one solution is quite unique. The one question which I've always wondered is how the hell did this find you? How did you end up in this world?
Actually, that's a funny story. So I was working for a company called On2Go. They're doing really well, actually. They're going public in the next few months, and I really liked the company. I thought it was a brilliant company. That being said, I felt that I needed to be somewhere where I would experience more growth, and where the industry would grow more rapidly. And so I think I took a blockchain. I did a blockchain university back in 2017. And you needed to basically build a business model using the blockchain technology and basically disrupting an existing industry using the blockchain technology. So I did apply. I managed to get in. I think it was one of the first blockchain universities, and it was in Copenhagen. And I basically joined the university, and it was a workshop program where you would basically help a company leverage the blockchain technology. And I was not working. Chainalysis was one of these companies, but I was actually not with Chainalysis. That being said, Chainalysis started pitching, the idea of, preventing money laundering on the blockchain and, really creating transparency and trust in the blockchain. And that really caught my eye and my interest. And I got to meet the CEO of Chainalysis, Michael Gruninger. We connected very, very quickly, and we were very much we got along very, very quickly. And I think 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, I basically joined Chainalysis. So 1 month later, it was very quick. It was unexpected, and yeah, it's been crazy since then. I've never. This is one thing that I often tell new hires or people join the company. I always feel extremely dumb when it comes to this industry because we're still at an infancy stage, and we're still building the pillars of the different technologies that we're seeing in the industry. So there's always something new, and that's a very unique place to be in, right? So you're building the technology as we speak, and so you're always learning something new. Which is why I always, if anyone is, not sure about what they plan on doing next, and, probably they're not happy about their existing job or industry. I think that the blockchain space is the best place where to go, or like where to really start looking into, because you're basically have the chance to become an expert pretty quickly, because there's very few people within the space. And actually, it is amazing how easy it is still today, like to connect with like extremely high level people within the industry, because the space is extremely small compared to the banking industry, for example. So it's just been amazing. And as I said, I always say, like, I feel extremely dumb on a daily basis, but that's a very unique feeling, because you basically have the chance to learn every day, and you never get bored. So that's exactly what I was looking for when I left my previous company, and I cannot complain.
Well, good for you. I think the advice I always pass to a lot of people kind of looking for a career in fintech is it's more about backing the right horse. Everyone seems to have a good product, but Chainalysis seem to be doing something right. They've raised a lot of money. They're growing at a rapid rate. They've obviously got a good product. But I think one line of questioning that I've been quite interested to ask with everybody that I'm doing a podcast with is obviously the topic of COVID, or the pandemic, which is caused maybe a lot of problem and played into some people's hands in some degree. But I'm interested to know maybe how Chainalysis managed the challenges that the pandemic has thrown up, and how you sail through that.
Definitely. I mean, the pandemic has been and is, currently still happening. I think that we're feeling that in Asia more probably than in Europe or the US at this point. I think that Chainalysis has always had like a decentralized culture and a decentralized structure. So we've always had like offices in different places. Initially, it was between Denmark and New York, but then that evolved into London, Singapore, Tokyo. So we were always used to being decentralized in a way. And when I started at Chainalysis, for example, 4 years ago, I started and I was working in Berlin, and the company was between New York and Copenhagen. So it was always part of the culture to potentially being remote, adding value remotely. And so that didn't really disrupt our culture, because obviously this pandemic pushed a lot of companies to change the way they approach hiring, to change the way they approach onboarding new people, meaning, like potentially you wouldn't see your direct report or your colleagues for 1 year or for the first 6 months or for the first 4 weeks. So I believe that for a lot of people that join Chainalysis and maybe were not used to that model, probably that could have been some sort of challenge initially. But for the company, we were already structured to cope with that, to deal with that. So that was very important, because, like, we are extremely agile and extremely flexible. And that, obviously there was a lot of uncertainty initially. I remember when the first news came out, we had a hiring freeze, so we couldn't hire anyone in the region or globally because of the uncertainty of the pandemic. That obviously evolved, and I think that a lot of companies realized that this could be an opportunity to further accelerate their growth. And this is exactly what happened with Chainalysis. We, I believe, quadrupled our valuation, really managed to double, or we're targeting to double the number of employees by the end of the year. So wow. It's been amazing. Now we're over 300. We're looking at over 420 by the end of the year. When I joined 4 years ago, we were 30 people. So it's a big difference. But I think that, like some of those things, were things that every company has faced. Some companies were already structured in that way, and that was helpful. And that was the case for Chainalysis. I also think that, what the company did was to really invest even more in people, and make sure that, they would understand that, we would be going through this together, between the employees and the company. So, some things that we did, for example, everyone at the company would have a budget, to spend, funds on, having like a home office, basically. So really making sure that, employees would feel comfortable. Another thing that we did was to basically give a budget for everyone to focus on their professional development outside of Chainalysis, for example. So anything that could be interesting for within the industry, or anything learning a new language, for example. So really trying to not simply tackle the professional aspect, but also the personal aspect for the employees. So those are things that Chainalysis worked on, and I think have been extremely helpful. And yeah, like based on the existing outcomes, I think that we're doing pretty well.
That's great to hear a company putting obviously staff well-being at the top of the page for sure. You mentioned obviously Chainalysis is growing at a rapid rate and continuing to. How have you guys attracted and equally maybe retained talent? I mean, especially when you take into account that they may not be meeting peers or managers or leaders and so forth.
Definitely. Maybe I can focus on on attracting talent first. I think that, the cryptocurrency industry, the blockchain industry is a very hot industry right now. So a lot of people are interested or curious about the industry. That being said, as you know, there's a lot of volatility in the markets. There's a lot of big companies that are being, they're going through a lot of regulatory review in Asia, globally. So there's a lot of uncertainty still, at least for external viewers. So it's very difficult to find a company, and I'm talking about Chainalysis here, that basically goes hand in hand with regulation. So if you think about exchanges in the space, they're doing extremely well, and they're going to continue to grow in the next months and years. That being said, that's a riskier bet, because there's a lot of exchanges right now that are going through a lot of regulatory pressure. Sometimes they're shutting down their operations. When you look at Chainalysis is basically building more trust in blockchains. So we're not like selling, we're not like mining gold, or we're selling using the token shovels here. So what we're doing here is making sure that we build more trust in the industry, and we allow new players to join the industry. We allow regulators and governments to feel more comfortable with the technology. And so if there is more regulation, that's a good thing for Chainalysis. So it's very difficult to find a company that provides that certainty within a very uncertain industry, at least for now, and at least for external viewers. So that's definitely been probably our biggest selling point in the industry. When it comes to retaining talent, I would say that, it's extremely important to make sure that the company aligns the expectations with the expectations of the candidate or of the employee. So making sure that before you hire someone, the expectations of the company are aligned with the expectations of the potential future employee. Because often I see this often where, you have a very smart and very bright person, but this person has very high expectations or very different expectations from what the role would require. Or in other cases, for example, I see companies, not focusing on building a growth path for their employees. So what we try to do is obviously, when possible, is to promote internally, to make sure that, if there are new roles, sharing those roles internally first, to make sure that if anyone wants to apply for those roles, they're able to do so. But also like building a path with the individuals. So understanding what are their priorities, understanding where they see themselves in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then building a plan with them. And I think that, it sounds probably very basic, but like most companies are not doing that. And at least like based on my own experience and what I'm seeing in the industry, not simply blockchain, but in general. And I think that that's really something that, we're working a lot on. And, again, like not simply thinking about the professional side, but also the personal side. So really investing much more in that. I think that helps as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting to hear. I think obviously what comes with a company growing at such a rate as Chainalysis is obviously ensuring that staff are happy and content, and obviously have a career path and so forth. But does that equally kind of put a lot of challenges and pressure on you as a leader in APAC in terms of being part of a hyper growth business?
I mean, yes, it's. I think that more than the pressure is not I don't see pressure as a bad thing. I think it's a good thing to have. I think that we are often like climbing mountains or moving mountains without really realizing it. So we're really like growing exponentially. And we are facing challenges. When you're doing that, you're going to face a lot of challenges. Whether it's making sure that you invest locally in the region. So some of the things that happen often when you have like an American company or a SaaS company growing this fast, there's going to be a growth that will be replicated in Europe and then in APAC. Generally, that's the order. It's US, EMEA, and then APAC. So obviously, we need to cope with the expectations, the growth expectations. In order to do that, we need to invest locally. So we need to make sure that we cover key functions for the region within a specific location and within different locations in the region. So that's a very important focus that we have. Obviously, maintaining the same level of quality when it comes to the hires while accelerating the process is a challenge that we have. Because you want to keep the same high quality, but it's extremely difficult to do that when you need to move much faster. And obviously, also like we're going back to the question before, like retaining talent. Like we have built experts within the industry within the last 3-4 years, and we wouldn't want any one of those experts to leave the company because there's a major opportunity cost there that you would be facing. I see the pressure as a good thing because it challenges me and it motivates me to do more. And I just focus on what I can control, like focusing on things that could potentially slow our growth or, like really make it difficult for us to grow in a specific region or territory within the region because of, like political situations or macro level situations that we cannot control. That's not really something that I focus on. I focus on the day to day, and I focus on small improvements every day. And as I said, like we're probably moving mountains, but we're not realizing it. But then when you look back 6 months from now, you'll see that. So that's the philosophy that I try to apply on every day.
Good to hear. Very inspiring. I did a bit of research, Ulisse, on yourself. I saw you were listed as Forbes 30 under 30. I'm keen to know obviously how that comes about. But equally, I guess maybe just looping that back into maybe sort of leadership in Asia and with yourself. But it'd be good to know maybe someone especially listed in kind of Forbes 30 under 30, how you define a leader in your opinion.
Yes, so that happened actually last year. I was selected among extremely talented people, and it was obviously an honor to be part of that list. Obviously, I'm not focused on that list much. I'm just focused on doing better every day. I think that there are plenty of extremely talented executives and extremely smart people in any industry. That being said, based on my experience, it is extremely difficult to find a person who's talented but is also a leader. And this is something that I've seen in the past, but as I said, like it's very rare. And at Chainalysis, it was really mind blowing the number of leaders that I've seen within the same company. And the way that I would define a leader, obviously, it's extremely subjective and difficult to define, but from my personal experience, when, you get to meet a person and this person might be, extremely successful, might have an extremely important role, but whenever you're having a conversation with this person, you always feel at the same level. So this person will never make you feel uncomfortable about a conversation that you have with the person. So you have equal business stature, basically, in a way. And that's extremely rare because with the CEO of Chainalysis, for example, Michael Groninger, or with the chief strategy officer and co-founder, Jonathan Levin, it's something that I share with them as well. Like, I always felt like my input would be as equal as their input when we were having a conversation.
Wow.
And that's amazing. Like basically them being open, and being open to share also their weaknesses, for example, but also making sure that you are at the same level, equal business stature when you're speaking with the person. I think that's something that once you identify that within a person, then all the other positive qualities of a leader, like listening to people and all that comes naturally. But if you don't have that, it's very rare that you have all the other qualities. So that's been my personal experience. Obviously, I don't know if it applies to everyone, but I think that's something that really struck me as something unique.
Thank you. I think if we just maybe loop it back around to kind of the world which you operate in, which is fundamentally crypto. It took me a little while to kind of really understand kind of Chainalysis and what they did. And I think the best way that I could summarize it was almost like fighting illicit activity within or using cryptocurrency, which I found fascinating in its own right. But obviously crypto adoption among the retail world and investors has rocketed this year. I think a quote that I saw was nearly 900%. How does that impact kind of your business in Asia, and has a lot of that growth kind of been driven from APAC?
Yeah, those are all great points to discuss. I think that one of the things that we're focusing on at Chainalysis in general is to really educate different stakeholders within the industry and within other industries to understand what is true and what is not when it comes to blockchain data. So you might often hear that blockchain or cryptocurrencies are still used by criminals, and they're used to purchase drugs and all that. One of the things that I say is that if you look at 2019, if you actually look at 2020, so like the last 12 months, we're actually seeing that if you look at the day-to-day transactions happening on the blockchain, only 0.6% or less are connected to illicit activities. So actually the vast majority of the transactions that are happening in the blockchain are connected to licit activities. So they're related to illicit activities. Okay. That's a very important point that we need to focus on. When it comes to the growth in the industry, it's been spectacular. So if we look at the past 2 years, in APAC, for example, there's been a 2,300% growth since 2019. Wow. In terms of adoption. If we focus on retail investors, you mentioned the 881% growth this year, which is extremely impressive. But also, APAC has always been a very active and strong region for cryptocurrencies. I believe that what's changing now, what's driving a large part of that growth is also the decentralized finance, DeFi adoption, and a lot of that also comes from emerging markets. So we've seen, for example, Vietnam, or we've seen India moving from our global crypto index to 11th to 2nd, for example, this year. Vietnam being second on that list, on the DeFi list. Obviously, the peer-to-peer interactions play a big role. But APAC is growing exponentially. And APAC is also a very good use case for cryptocurrencies. Because often, there's a big part of, if you look at India, for example, or, even Vietnam, of the population that does not have access to banking accounts. So bank accounts and, those type of financial services. So cryptocurrency becomes extremely appealing to these people. So I think there's an extremely big growth or exponential growth these days in APAC. In the world in general, but APAC is going to grow even further in the next few months. I think that what we need to see in APAC for that to continue is more transparent and clear regulation. I think that India, for example, made a great step forward by moving from banning cryptocurrency to regulating cryptocurrency. Now we're talking about considering crypto as an asset class or as a commodity, but we need to see more of that in Southeast Asia. Singapore is obviously doing a lot, and the regulator MAS in Singapore is very knowledgeable about cryptocurrency. But it would be great to see that also in other countries in Southeast Asia. So I think that regulation is not a bad thing. Sometimes it might slow down the growth in the short term, but in the long run, that's what you need. Because another thing that players in the industry need to understand is that in order for this industry to become more mainstream, because I believe that we could argue that this is already mainstream, is for institutional investors to join even more the industry. Because obviously we've seen a lot of institutional investors joining the industry, because that will change the perception of cryptocurrency. That will make it much easier for you to access your bank account and also trade cryptocurrency for your bank account. So I think all these things are happening. It's just that we need to be a bit patient and, make sure that people are educated and understand, what illicit means, what licit means, and actually focus on the data, because that's actually the ultimate truth.
Fascinating business. Fascinating business. Just out of interest, I mean, for someone that works in the crypto world, for anybody that's maybe watching that might be a savvy investor in their own right, do you invest in crypto? Is that something that you back?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wouldn't give any financial or investment advice here. I am definitely not that person. That being said, yes, I believe that it's an interesting possibility. It's an interesting investment. Obviously, it has a high risk, so I don't think that everyone could tolerate the risk and volatility that you see in the industry. But I've been doing this for I think 6 or 7 years in the industry. So I've been doing that since then. So I'm very familiar with the industry. I'm very familiar with my own risk tolerance. So that's important. But yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of potential. It remains, volatile. It remains risky. But I definitely recommend anyone. It's not about really investing. To me, it's more about getting to understand how it works. So setting up an account on an exchange, doing a couple of transactions. You don't need to buy an entire Bitcoin. Some people might think that that's the case. That's not the case. You can start with $10 or $20 and really try to understand how it works and why it makes sense. Then, if you find it interesting, potentially you can invest in some protocols. But I would just try to take it step by step and gradually, become more involved.
Oh, perfect. Great advice. I'm pleased we did this podcast at this point of the year and not before during the European football when England lost to Italy, because I would have been rather glum. But Ulisse, thank you so much for the time. Look, it's fascinating to talk to you, and it's fascinating to hear about Chainalysis, and I'm interested and excited to see how this business continues to grow and scale in APAC and under your guidance in particular. So thank you for taking the time to have a chat with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Have a nice evening, and talk to you for a beer soon.
I hope so. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
You've been listening to In Fintech by EC1 Partners. Find us at www.ec1partners.com or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook.